For years, I sent my parents $3,600 a month. But at dinner, my mother complained they were broke. My golden child brother had stolen the entire $194,400 for offshore gambling. When he bragged about a $275,000 donation at a charity gala, he laughed. Mom will never believe you. I stayed silent until I took the microphone on stage. My 4-minute speech made the entire ballroom gasp. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was doing the right thing. I moved across the country after college, built a career in finance, and lived a simple life. I wasn't driving luxury cars or taking expensive vacations. Every month, before I paid for anything fun, I sent money home. $3,600 every single month. My parents never asked for praise. I never expected any. They had worked hard raising me and my older brother Daniel, and I wanted them to enjoy retirement without worrying about bills. At least that's what I thought. The dinner that changed everything started like every other family dinner. My mom insisted on cooking too much food. My dad quietly set the table. Daniel arrived 20 minutes late, carrying a bottle of expensive wine. There he is, Mom said with a grin. Always so busy. Then she looked at me. You should learn from your brother. He always makes time for family. I forced a smile. I had flown nearly 2,000 miles just to spend the weekend with them. Daniel lived less than 30 minutes away. Nobody seemed to notice the difference. It wasn't new. Growing up, Daniel was the golden child. If he got a B, everyone celebrated because he had worked so hard. If I got straight A's, Mom would ask why one test wasn't a perfect score. After a while, you stop expecting fairness. Dinner was peaceful for maybe 15 minutes. Then Mom sighed while serving potatoes. I don't know how much longer we can keep this house. Dad looked down at his plate. The property taxes keep going up, she continued. Everything costs more now. I stopped chewing. What do you mean? We're barely getting by, she answered. Sometimes I wonder if we'll have to sell. I blinked. Mom, what happened to the money? She frowned. What money? The money I've been sending? The table went quiet. Dad slowly looked up. Daniel reached for another dinner roll, like the conversation had nothing to do with him. I've been sending $3,600 every month for years, I said. For your expenses. Mom stared at me. Evelyn, you've never sent us money? I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I thought she was joking. Come on, I'm serious. I've transferred it every month. She shook her head. No, sweetheart, we would have remembered something like that. I looked at Dad. He avoided my eyes. Dad? He cleared his throat. I don't know anything about monthly transfers. Daniel leaned back. There must be some misunderstanding. His voice was calm. Too calm. I handled most of Mom and Dad's banking, he added. Maybe you're confusing an investment account or something? I'm not confused. I knew exactly where my money went. Or at least I thought I did. Every transfer had gone to the account Daniel gave me years ago. He'd told me our parents weren't comfortable with online banking. I'll manage everything for them, he'd said. At the time, it sounded reasonable. He lived nearby. He visited them every week. Why wouldn't I trust my own brother? Mom looked genuinely hurt. If we had received that kind of money, do you think I'd be worrying about groceries? Nobody answered. The room suddenly felt smaller. I reached for my phone. I can show you. Daniel smiled. Not a nervous smile, just a relaxed little grin. Evelyn, he said, let's not ruin dinner over a banking mistake. A banking mistake? 4 words. That was all it took to make something deep inside me shift. Because it wasn't one transfer. It wasn't even 1 year. It was years of automatic payments. After dinner, I sat alone in my old bedroom with my laptop open. I logged into my bank account and searched my transfer history, month after month. Same amount, same destination, same account. I grabbed a notepad and started adding everything together. 1 year, then another, then another. When I finally reached the total, I stopped writing. I checked the number twice, then a third time. $194,400. Almost $200,000. Sent faithfully, gone. And according to my mother, they had never received a single cent. I kept staring at the screen, hoping I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. Every transfer was there. Every confirmation email, every monthly payment going back years. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the old chair that used to sit in my childhood bedroom. Nothing in that room had really changed. The faded family photos were still on the shelf. Daniel's baseball trophies still took up twice as much space as my debate awards. That wasn't an accident. It never had been. When we were kids, Daniel could do almost anything and somehow come out looking like the hero. If he forgot to do his chores, Mom would laugh. He's just absent-minded. If I forgot once, I'd hear, "Evelyn, you're the responsible one. I expect better from you." That sentence followed me for years. You're the responsible one. It sounded like a compliment. In reality, it meant I was expected to solve problems nobody else had to deal with. When Daniel wrecked his first car, my parents helped him buy another one. When I needed money for graduate school, I took out loans. Nobody argued about it. It was simply understood. Daniel needed help. I could handle myself. Looking back, I realized I'd accepted that role without asking questions. Even the monthly transfers started the same way. A few years after I moved away, Daniel called me. "Mom and Dad are struggling," he had said. "They're too proud to ask, but they need help." "How much?" "Whatever you can manage." I offered a number. He was the one who suggested $3,600. "It'll cover everything," he told me. "I'll make sure every dollar goes to them." I never asked for proof. Why would I? He was my brother. A knock on the bedroom door pulled me back. Dad stood there with his hands in his pockets. "You still awake?" "Yeah." He stepped inside but didn't sit down. "I don't like seeing you and your brother fighting." "I'm not trying to fight with him." He nodded slowly. "I know." There was a long silence. "Dad, did Daniel ever mention the transfers?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "No." "Not once?" "No." His answer came too quickly. Before I could ask anything else, he quietly said goodnight and walked away. I watched him leave, feeling like he wanted to say more but couldn't. The next morning, I drove to a nearby coffee shop to clear my head. My phone rang while I was waiting for my order. Victoria. She was the executive director of a children's education foundation my company had sponsored for years. "Please tell me you're still coming to the gala next month," she said. "I wouldn't miss it." "Good. Daniel already confirmed?" That caught my attention. "Daniel, of course. He's become one of our biggest supporters." I frowned. "I didn't know he was involved?" Victoria laughed. "Oh, he's been talking non-stop about the foundation." I stirred my coffee without taking a sip. "That's interesting. We're actually planning to recognize him during the event?" "For what?" "For his generosity." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. If you've ever had a moment where little pieces suddenly start fitting together, you know the feeling. At first, you hope it's just a coincidence. Then you realize there are too many coincidences. "So," I asked carefully, "what exactly did he donate?" There was a brief pause. "You really don't know?" "No." "I thought your company told you." "My company?" Victoria sounded genuinely surprised. "Daniel said he'd personally donated $275,000 to launch the new education project." I stopped walking. The traffic around me faded into background noise. Because I knew that project. Every dollar of its funding had come from my company's corporate giving program, not from Daniel. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there with my phone pressed against my ear. "Victoria," I finally said, "are you sure it was listed as a personal donation?" "Absolutely." She sounded confused by my reaction. "We even have a speech planned." Daniel wanted to stay humble at first, but the board insisted on recognizing him. Stay humble. That almost made me laugh. "I'll see you at the gala," I said quietly before ending the call. For a few minutes, I sat in my car without starting the engine. Then something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a sister anymore. At work, I was the chief financial officer of a company that handled multi-million-dollar budgets. My job was to spot inconsistencies, verify records, and ask uncomfortable questions. I'd spent years doing that for strangers. I'd never done it for my own family. The first call I made wasn't to Daniel. It was to Thomas Reed. Thomas had been our company's outside forensic accountant for years. Calm, careful, and impossible to impress. He answered on the second ring. Evelyn, everything okay? I need a favor. His tone changed immediately. What kind of favor? I need someone I trust to review several years of bank transfers. He paused. Corporate or personal? Personal. Another short silence. That's usually the harder kind. I know. I explained only the facts. Monthly transfers. The account number. My parents saying they'd never received the money. I deliberately left emotion out of it. Thomas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Don't accuse anyone yet." I'm trying not to. Good. Start with documents. Statements, account ownership, authorization records, facts first. It was exactly what I would have told one of my own employees. Before hanging up, he added one more thing. If someone has been moving money for years, paper trails usually survive longer than stories. That sentence stayed with me. Instead of driving home, I pulled into a quiet parking lot and called my mother. She answered after a few rings. Everything okay, sweetheart? I just need to ask you something. Of course. The account Daniel gave me years ago? What account? The one you and Dad were supposed to use? She sounded puzzled. I don't know the account number. Were you ever listed on it? I don't think so. I took a slow breath. Mom, did you ever go to the bank to open a joint account with Daniel? No. Did anyone ask you to sign paperwork? No. What about online access, passwords, monthly statements? No, honey. Each answer came quickly, not defensive, just honest. I've never been comfortable with online banking, she said. That's why Daniel always said he'd take care of everything. I wrote every answer down in a notebook beside me. It felt strange interviewing my own mother. But once I started separating facts from feelings, the picture became clearer. So you've never logged into that account? I wouldn't even know how. You've never withdrawn money from it? No. You've never deposited anything? No. She hesitated. Am I supposed to be worried? I looked out through the windshield. People walked past carrying groceries, talking on their phones, living completely ordinary lives. I wanted that feeling back. I don't know yet, I admitted. I just need to understand what's been happening. She grew quiet. Then she said something that hit harder than anything else. I trusted Daniel with all of that. Not most of it, not sometimes, all of it. If you've made it this far, let me ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you confront your brother immediately or keep gathering evidence first? I'd really like to know your answer. I thanked Mom for her time and ended the call. My notebook was filling with dates, names, and questions. One page stood out more than the others. At the top, I'd written a single sentence. Who actually owned the account? A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Thomas. The bank confirmed one thing already. Your mother's name has never appeared on that account. Thomas called instead of replying to my text. I've got a little more. I grabbed my notebook again. The account wasn't a joint account, he said. It appears to have only one active owner. Can you tell who? Not yet. Because of privacy laws, I can't access personal account records without authorization. But if you still have the transfer details, there may be another way. I do. Good. Send me every confirmation you've got. Within an hour, I'd forwarded years of payment receipts, transfer references, and bank confirmations. Looking at them all together made me sick. Not because of the money, because every receipt represented trust. I had never questioned any of it. By the afternoon, my own bank agreed to help me review the transfer history tied to my account. Since I was the sender, they could confirm where my money had gone. The representative walked me through the records one by one. Every payment reached the same destination. None had ever bounced back. None had been redirected. The account had been active the entire time. I thanked her and hung up. That answered one question. The money hadn't disappeared inside the banking system. It had arrived exactly where it was sent. I drove back to my parents' house before dinner. Mom was in the kitchen peeling apples. She smiled when she saw me, but it looked tired. Want to help? For a moment, we just stood there, making a pie together. No arguments, no accusations, just the quiet sounds of a normal afternoon. I keep thinking about what you asked yesterday, she said. So do I. She set the knife down. Evelyn, if I'd known you were sending money, I would have thanked you. I looked at her hands. They weren't the hands of someone pretending. They were shaking. I believe you. She looked up, surprised. You do? I do. Those 3 words changed something between us. For years, I'd blamed her for always choosing Daniel. Maybe she had, but that didn't mean she knew everything he'd been doing. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I hate that you're hurting. So do I. Neither of us mentioned Daniel. We didn't have to. That evening, my phone rang again. Victoria. I wanted to run something by you. I'm listening. The gala committee approved a few program changes. What kind of changes? We're moving the recognition awards closer to the end of the evening. I remembered what she'd told me. Daniel was supposed to receive public recognition for his so-called personal donation. Any reason for the change? She laughed. Mostly timing. It actually gives us more flexibility. More flexibility. To everyone else, those words meant nothing. To me, they meant time. Time for facts, time for answers, time to decide exactly what I was going to do. I thanked her and ended the call. A few minutes later, Thomas emailed me an update. He hadn't reached a final conclusion yet, but he had found enough unusual activity to justify a full forensic review. Several transfers connected to the account raised questions. The audit was officially underway. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my calendar. The investigation would take a few more weeks. The charity gala was coming just as fast. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't wondering if something had gone wrong. I was waiting to find out how much had gone wrong. And I had a feeling the audit and the gala were on a collision course. I wasn't expecting Rachel to call me. In fact, we'd barely spoken over the years. She and Daniel had been married for almost 8 years, but every family gathering felt the same. Daniel did most of the talking. Rachel smiled, stayed polite, and rarely disagreed with him in public. So when her name appeared on my phone, I answered immediately. Hi, Rachel. Her voice was quiet. Can we meet? Just the two of us. There was something in her tone that made me cancel the rest of my afternoon. We met at a small cafe halfway between our offices. She looked exhausted. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that builds over months, maybe years. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she kept turning her wedding ring without realizing it. You probably think I'm here to defend Daniel, she said. I honestly don't know why you're here. She looked down at her coffee. I'm here because I think you deserve the truth. Neither of us touched our drinks. Rachel took a slow breath. Our marriage is falling apart. I didn't interrupt. I filed for separation last month. That caught me off guard. I'm sorry. Don't be. She gave a sad smile. I should have done it sooner. For the next several minutes, she told me things I never imagined hearing. Daniel had been borrowing money for years. At first, they were small personal loans. Then came credit cards. Then a second mortgage on their house. Rachel said she kept believing his explanations. Bad investments, temporary cash flow problems, business opportunities that would pay off later. There was always another story, she said. And I believed him. Did Mom and Dad know? She shook her head. He made sure they never found out. I felt my jaw tighten. How bad is it? She looked out the window before answering. We're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I stared at her. Hundreds? She nodded. I didn't even know the real number until the lawyers started collecting financial records. Everything Thomas had been finding suddenly felt much less abstract. This wasn't careless spending. This was something much bigger. Rachel reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. I wasn't sure if I should bring these. Inside were copies of loan statements, past due notices, letters from lenders. Some balances were so high I had to read them twice. I found something else, she said. What? He wasn't losing money on investments? She swallowed hard. He was gambling. I looked up. Are you sure? I wish I wasn't. She explained how she'd discovered hidden emails from online betting sites. There were payment confirmations, account alerts, messages offering VIP rewards based on how much he'd wagered. Some nights, he'd stay in his office until 3 a.m, claiming he was working. He wasn't working. He was gambling. Suddenly, I remembered every time he'd shown up late to family dinners looking tired. Every excuse, every confident smile. Every story about another successful business deal. None of it looked the same anymore. Rachel watched my face carefully. I know this is a lot. It is. I almost didn't tell you. What changed? She answered without hesitation. Your parents. I frowned. They're good people. They don't deserve this. Neither did she. Neither did I. Rachel opened the folder one last time and pulled out a printed spreadsheet. I found this while organizing documents for my attorney. Rows of dates filled the page. Transfers, account numbers, reference codes. I couldn't understand what I was looking at, she said, until you called me yesterday. I leaned closer. One account number immediately looked familiar. It matched the destination account where I'd been sending money every month. My heartbeat sped up. Rachel pointed to another column. I had a forensic accountant trace several outgoing transfers. Where did they go? She looked me straight in the eyes. The money you sent your parents didn't stay in that account? My hands tightened around the edge of the table. It was transferred out. To where? Rachel didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. To offshore gambling accounts under Daniel's control. I didn't sleep much that night. Rachel's spreadsheet stayed open on my laptop while I compared it with my own transfer records. The dates matched. The amounts matched. For years, I'd been looking at the same numbers without realizing what they actually meant. The next morning, Thomas called. I finished the preliminary review. His voice was calm, but I knew him well enough to hear the concern underneath. Tell me, what I'm about to say is based on financial records, not assumptions. That's exactly what I need. He paused for a second. Your transfers consistently entered the same account. I know. They rarely stayed there for more than 48 hours. I closed my eyes. Where did they go? Multiple destinations. He began listing them one by one. Payments to online gambling processors, transfers to digital asset exchanges, large withdrawals that ultimately benefited accounts connected to Daniel. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. There were also periods where money moved in circles, Thomas continued. Circles. It would leave one account, pass through another, then return to an account under the same control before being spent. To hide the trail? That's one possible explanation. He never rushed to conclusions. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. What about my parents? I asked. Did any of it reach them? His answer came immediately. No. Not a few dollars. Not a partial payment. Nothing. I looked at the notebook where I'd written $194,400. For years, I'd pictured my parents paying medical bills, fixing the roof, buying groceries without worrying. Instead, they'd been counting every dollar while I believed I was taking care of them. I thanked Thomas before ending the call. For a long time, I just sat there. I wasn't crying anymore. The anger had changed into something colder. At the office, I walked into a budget meeting like any other Tuesday. People discussed forecasts. Departments requested funding. Someone made a joke about coffee prices. I answered questions, approved reports, and took notes. No one in that room had any idea my family was falling apart. That strange contrast stayed with me. Life doesn't stop just because your world does. During lunch, Victoria sent me a message confirming my seat assignment for the charity gala. Daniel would be sitting 2 tables away from me. I stared at the seating chart for a few seconds before locking my phone. For the first time, I wasn't nervous about seeing him. I wanted to hear what story he would tell next. Late that afternoon, another email from Thomas arrived. Preliminary audit summary. I opened it immediately. The report was organized exactly the way he'd promised. Dates, account numbers, supporting documents, verified transactions. Opinion kept separate from evidence. Near the end, one sentence stood out. No evidence was found that any of Evelyn Carter's recurring transfers benefited her parents. Reading it in black and white hit differently than hearing it over the phone. There was no misunderstanding, no accounting error, no forgotten bank account. Daniel hadn't simply lied once. He'd built an entire life on those lies. My phone rang again. Thomas. I almost waited until tomorrow, he said, but I don't think I should. What happened? The extended review uncovered another issue. I sat up straighter. What kind of issue? It isn't directly about the missing money. My stomach tightened. It's legal. He lowered his voice. And if these records are accurate, Daniel's financial problems are only part of what we're dealing with. Thomas didn't waste time. The extended review picked up public financial records tied to Daniel. What kind of records? Tax liens, civil filings, collection actions. I grabbed a pen. How many? More than I'd expect from someone presenting himself as a successful businessman. He wasn't exaggerating. As he walked me through the documents, a pattern emerged. Unpaid tax obligations, lenders pursuing repayment, businesses that had quietly shut down, legal notices mailed to old addresses. None of it matched the image Daniel showed our family. None of it matched the expensive suits, luxury watches, or generous public donations. This is all public? I asked. Yes. So anyone who looked would find it? They would. The problem was simple. No one had looked. Not me, not my parents. We'd all believed the version of Daniel that Daniel wanted us to believe. That weekend, I drove back to see my parents again. Dad was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee. He smiled when he saw me. You escaping your office for a while? You could say that. I sat beside him. For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things. The neighbors, the weather. A baseball game neither of us had actually watched. Eventually, I asked the question I'd been carrying around for days. Dad, when Daniel handled the finances, he sighed before I even finished. He'd give us cash now and then. Cash? He nodded. A few $100s. Every month? No. Whenever he thought we needed it. I stared at him. You thought that money came from him? Of course. He looked genuinely confused. He always said business was going well. And you never questioned it? He gave me a tired smile. When your son tells you he's helping, you want to believe him. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Dad wasn't protecting Daniel. He'd simply trusted him, just like I had. He took another sip of coffee. I always felt bad accepting it. Why? I didn't want to become a burden. I looked away. For years, I'd imagined my parents depending on my support. Instead, they'd been trying not to ask anyone for anything. Dad suddenly frowned. Is this about that dinner? I nodded. There are things I'm still figuring out. He didn't press for details. He just placed a hand on my shoulder. I know you've always tried to do right by us. That was the first time either of my parents had ever acknowledged what I'd been trying to do. I wished it had happened under different circumstances. Driving home, I received another update from Thomas. He'd compiled everything into one organized report. The gambling losses, the transfer trail, the tax issues, the lawsuits, the debt. None of it existed by itself. Together, they told one story. A man desperately trying to keep a carefully built image alive while everything underneath it collapsed. A few days later, a large envelope arrived at my office. Gold lettering, heavy paper. The official invitation to the charity gala. Inside was the evening program. Sponsors, award recipients, special guests. Then I reached the final page. There, printed in bold letters, was the headline for the night's biggest recognition. Special Philanthropy Award, presented to Daniel Carter, in recognition of his personal donation of $275,000 to the Children's Education Initiative. I read it twice. Every word was polished. Every word looked official. And every word was built on a lie. The gala invitation stayed on my desk for 2 days. Every time I looked at Daniel's name printed under Special Philanthropy Award, I reminded myself of one thing. Facts first, emotion second. By the end of the week, I had everything in one folder. My bank records, Thomas's preliminary audit, Rachel's financial documents, the transfer history, public court filings, tax records. Nothing in that folder depended on rumors. Every page could be traced back to a document. I called Daniel. We need to talk. He sounded relaxed. About what? In person. He laughed. You're being dramatic. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. He agreed without asking another question. We met at a quiet steakhouse we used to visit with our parents. For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine, asked about my job, talked about the gala like it was the highlight of his year. You'll be there, right? He asked. I will. Good. He smiled. It'll be a big night. I looked across the table at him. I know. When the waiter walked away, I slid the folder across the table. Daniel glanced at it. What's this? Open it. He flipped through the first few pages. The smile disappeared for a moment. Then it came back. You've been busy. I know where the money went. He closed the folder. So? So our parents never received it. He shrugged. They didn't need every dollar. I stared at him. That's your answer? You sent money. I stole nothing. You trusted me to manage it. Don't play with words, Daniel. His expression hardened. For years, you told me you were taking care of Mom and Dad. I did take care of them. They were worried about losing their house. They still had a house. They struggled to buy groceries. They survived. Each answer made him sound colder. I took a slow breath. I also know about the gambling. That got his attention, only for a second. Then he leaned back. Rachel told you. I have documents. I don't care. I know about the tax liens. Silence. I know about the lawsuits. Still nothing. And I know the $275,000 donation wasn't yours. That finally made him smile again. Not because he was amused, because he thought he'd already won. He folded his hands on the table. So what do you want? I'm giving you one chance. He raised an eyebrow. Withdraw the donation claim. What? Tell Victoria the truth before the gala. And then? Face whatever comes next. He actually laughed. Not loudly, just enough for people at the next table to glance over. You've always been like this. Like what? You think facts matter more than people. They do when someone's lying. He shook his head. No, Evelyn. You still don't understand this family. I stood my ground. This isn't about the family anymore. It is. He leaned closer. You've been gone for years. I've been sending money for years. Exactly. He pointed at me. You've always been the one writing checks. And you've always needed someone to admire you. For the first time, his smile disappeared completely. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I pushed the folder back toward him. I'm asking you one last time. Cancel the award. Tell them the money came from my company's foundation. Tell Mom and Dad the truth. He didn't even look at the documents. Instead, he pushed the folder right back across the table. Then he gave a small laugh, the kind that made my stomach turn. Evelyn. He shook his head. Mom will never believe you. Daniel's words stayed with me all the way home. Mom will never believe you. A week earlier, that sentence would have broken me. Now it sounded like a challenge. The next few days were strangely quiet. Daniel never called. He never apologized. He acted as if our conversation had never happened. My mother, on the other hand, called almost every evening. The first conversation was gentle. Sweetheart, your brother said you two had a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She sighed. I hate seeing my children fight. So do I. Maybe you should meet again? We already did. She hesitated. Daniel said you've been accusing him of terrible things. I closed my eyes. Did he tell you why? He said you're under a lot of stress from work. Of course he did. By the third phone call, her tone had changed. You should apologize. For what? Families shouldn't keep score. I almost laughed. This wasn't about keeping score, it was about the truth. I'm not apologizing for asking where the money went. She grew quiet. I just want my family back. So do I, Mom. But I knew we weren't talking about the same family anymore. At work, I kept myself busy. Meetings, reports, budgets. Normal routines helped me think clearly. Every evening, I'd go home and review the documents one more time. Not because I doubted them, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. No missing pages, no incorrect dates, no assumptions, only facts. 2 nights before the gala, Rachel sent me a message. Can you talk? A minute later, another message appeared. Actually, I'll just send it. An attachment downloaded onto my phone. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between her and Daniel. I recognized his number immediately. Rachel had written, "You need to tell your parents the truth." Daniel replied, "Why? They believe what I tell them." A few minutes later, Rachel had sent, "Evelyn trusted you." His answer came almost instantly. She was useful. That's different. I stared at the screen. Useful. Not a sister, not family, useful. There was one more message. Rachel wrote, "You're destroying everyone around you." Daniel answered with only one sentence. "As long as nobody proves it, none of this matters." I put my phone down and walked to the kitchen. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel angry. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes after you've stopped expecting someone to change. Rachel called a few minutes later. I'm sorry you had to read that. I needed to. I almost deleted it. I'm glad you didn't. She was quiet for a moment. Are you still going to the gala? Yes. What are you going to do? I looked toward the folder sitting on my dining table. I'm going to tell the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. The morning of the gala felt surprisingly ordinary. People at work wished me a good evening. Someone joked that charity dinners always had terrible chicken. I smiled politely. Nobody knew I was carrying the biggest decision of my life. Before leaving the office, I opened my briefcase one last time. Inside was a single folder. Bank records, audit summaries, transfer confirmations, public court filings, Rachel's documents. Everything was organized in order. Every page supported the next. I closed the case and headed for my car. By the time I pulled into the hotel's entrance, the valet area was already full of luxury cars. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns walked across the red carpet, smiling for photographers. I stepped out, picked up my briefcase, and tightened my grip on the folder inside. For the first time that night, I saw Daniel through the glass doors. He was already inside, shaking hands, smiling, accepting congratulations, completely unaware of what I was carrying with me. The ballroom was already filling up when I found my parents. Mom smiled the moment she saw me. There you are. She hugged me tightly like she was trying to hold the family together with her arms alone. Dad stood beside her. He gave me a quiet nod. No speech, no questions. Just a look that lingered a little longer than usual. Daniel joined us a minute later, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Perfect tuxedo. Confident smile. He greeted guests by name as if he belonged there. Rachel arrived a few steps behind him. She barely looked at him. That told me everything I needed to know. Victoria came over to welcome us. I'm so glad everyone could make it. She turned to Daniel. We're excited to recognize you tonight. He smiled modestly. The foundation deserves all the credit. I watched him say it without blinking. If I hadn't known the truth, I probably would have believed him too. Once Victoria walked away, Mom looked at Daniel with pride. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, Mom. She turned toward me. You should be proud of your brother too. I didn't answer. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Finally, Mom sighed. Can't we just enjoy one evening together? Before I could respond, Dad spoke. Margaret. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone stopped talking. Maybe tonight isn't the night to force everyone to pretend. Mom looked at him in surprise. What does that mean? It means... Dad paused carefully. I think we should listen before choosing sides. Daniel let out a small laugh. Dad, seriously. I'm only saying we don't know everything. The room felt different. For the first time in my life, Dad hadn't rushed to defend Daniel. He hadn't defended me either, but he had asked for the truth. That alone was enough to catch Daniel off guard. Daniel recovered quickly. He smiled at Dad. You're worrying over nothing. I hope you're right, Dad answered. No one spoke after that. We took our seats as dinner was served. Around us, people laughed, toasted glasses, and talked about vacations, business, and charity projects. Our table barely made a sound. Mom pushed food around her plate without eating much. Dad quietly watched the stage. Rachel kept both hands folded in her lap. Daniel chatted comfortably with donors seated nearby, as though nothing unusual was happening. Every now and then, he'd laugh. Every time he did, I wondered how someone could stay so calm while carrying so many lies. My phone vibrated once. It was Thomas. Everything in your folder is backed by documentation. Stick to verified facts, I replied with a simple thumbs up. That was all that needed to be said. A few minutes later, Victoria stepped onto the stage. The lights dimmed. The conversations slowly faded. She welcomed everyone, thanked the sponsors, and spoke about the children the foundation had helped over the years. The audience applauded several times. Then the awards began. A local business owner, a longtime volunteer, a teacher who had dedicated 30 years to public education. One by one, they walked across the stage. Then Victoria smiled toward our table. And before we recognize tonight's major philanthropic donor, we'd like to invite someone from one of our corporate partners to say a few words about the importance of giving. I felt every heartbeat. Victoria looked directly at me. Evelyn Carter? The room turned in my direction. We'd be honored if you would join us on stage. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me as I walked toward the stage. The folder in my hand suddenly felt heavier than it had all evening. Victoria smiled and handed me the microphone. "We're grateful for your company's partnership," she said. "Please, take your time." I nodded. Then I looked across the ballroom. My parents were watching. Rachel sat perfectly still. Thomas gave me one small nod from the back of the room. Daniel smiled at me. He still thought this was his night. I took a slow breath. Thank you, everyone. My company has proudly supported this foundation because we believe children deserve opportunities they might not otherwise have. People nodded. A few applauded. I also believe generosity deserves recognition. I paused, but only when it's truthful. The room became noticeably quieter. I saw Daniel's smile begin to fade. I wasn't planning to say this tonight. I tried to resolve it privately. I asked the person involved to correct the record before this event. He refused. Nobody moved. Even the servers stopped walking. I opened the folder. My company funded the Children's Education Initiative through its corporate giving program. I looked toward Victoria. The foundation has complete records confirming those payments. She frowned slightly, clearly confused. I've also reviewed independent financial records concerning the personal donation being recognized tonight. I kept my voice steady. Those records do not support the claim that my brother, Daniel Carter, personally donated $275,000 to this project. A wave of whispers rolled through the ballroom. Daniel stood halfway from his chair. "Evelyn." His voice was sharp. "Sit down." I didn't even look at him. I am not accusing anyone without evidence. I commissioned an independent forensic review. The findings show that the claimed personal donation cannot be verified through the financial records available to us. Thomas remained seated. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Everything I was saying matched the report. I turned another page. There is something else I can personally verify. For several years, I transferred $3,600 every month, believing I was financially supporting my parents. My parents have confirmed they never received those funds. Gasps echoed across the room. My mother covered her mouth. Dad slowly lowered his eyes. Rachel didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. "I won't discuss private legal matters tonight," I continued, "but I will say this. Charity depends on trust. So do families. When either one is built on false claims, everyone pays the price." I closed the folder. I'm sharing this because the foundation deserves accurate recognition. My company deserves accurate recognition. And my parents deserve the truth. Silence. Complete silence. Victoria slowly stepped toward me. She wasn't angry. She looked shocked. "I think we need a brief recess," she said quietly. No one argued. People around the ballroom began talking all at once. Some stared at Daniel. Others looked toward Victoria. A few glanced at me before whispering to the people beside them. Daniel wasn't smiling anymore. His face had gone pale. I handed the folder to Victoria. "Everything I've said is supported by documentation." She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." I stepped away from the microphone. No applause, no cheering. Just hundreds of people trying to process what they'd just heard. As I walked through the ballroom doors into the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, angry. Then Daniel's voice echoed through the corridor. "Evelyn!" I stopped walking, but didn't turn around. His footsteps kept getting closer. "Are you out of your mind?" Daniel's voice echoed through the hallway before I even turned around. He was breathing hard, his tie already loosened. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I looked at him. "I didn't embarrass you. You did that yourself?" He pointed toward the ballroom. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes. You destroyed my reputation." I shook my head. I told the truth. His jaw tightened. "You think one audit proves everything?" It wasn't one audit. It was years of bank records. It was transfer confirmations. It was public financial filings. It was your own wife's documents. The moment I mentioned Rachel, he looked away. Only for a second. Then the anger came back. You've always been jealous? I almost smiled. If that's what you need to tell yourself. He stepped closer. You'll regret this. I've regretted trusting you. Neither of us spoke after that. There was nothing left to argue about. The evidence already existed. Whether he accepted it or not didn't change the facts. A hotel security manager quietly walked into the hallway. Is everything all right here? Yes, I answered. Daniel didn't. He muttered something under his breath and walked away without looking back. That was the last conversation we had for a long time. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had completely changed. People gathered in small groups. Victoria and several board members were reviewing the documents I'd handed them. Thomas had joined them, answering questions one at a time. Nobody looked interested in celebrating anymore. My parents found me near the exit. Mom's eyes were red. She didn't speak immediately. Dad did. Can we go somewhere quiet? We sat in a small lounge just off the lobby. For several minutes, nobody said anything. Finally, Mom broke the silence. Was it all true? I slid a copy of the audit summary across the table. I wish it wasn't. She read only the first page before stopping. Her hands began to shake. I don't understand. I know. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I thought Daniel was protecting us. So did I. Dad slowly reached over and placed his hand on hers. Neither of them defended Daniel. Neither of them accused me. For the first time in years, we were simply looking at the same facts together. A few days passed. The foundation officially announced that Daniel's recognition had been suspended pending a full review. My company confirmed that the education project had been funded through corporate philanthropy, not a personal donation. Word spread faster than I expected. People who had admired Daniel suddenly started asking questions. Some local media outlets contacted the foundation for comment. Attorneys began requesting documents. Thomas warned me that more inquiries would probably follow. It was strange. For so long, I'd felt responsible for carrying everything alone. Now the truth had its own momentum. I couldn't control where it went next. I didn't need to. One evening, I was finishing dinner when my phone rang. Mom. I answered immediately. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded different, quieter, more uncertain. I went to the bank today. I put my fork down. You did? Yes. She took a slow breath. I asked them to help me understand the account Daniel always talked about. She stopped speaking. I waited. When she finally continued, I realized something had changed. I need to tell you what they showed me. Mom didn't say much on the phone. I'd rather tell you in person. The next afternoon, I met my parents at their bank, the same branch they'd trusted for years without ever asking many questions. A bank representative explained everything carefully. The account I'd been sending money to had never belonged to my parents. They had never been owners, never authorized users, never even received statements. Mom sat there in complete silence. When the meeting ended, we walked outside without speaking. She finally stopped near a bench. Then she turned to me. I'm sorry. I'd imagined that moment so many times. I thought I'd feel satisfied. I didn't. She wiped away a tear before continuing. I kept comparing you to Daniel. I believed him. I doubted you. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. I should have listened. I stepped closer and hugged her. Not because everything was fixed. Because I could see she finally understood what had happened. Dad joined us a few seconds later. He looked at the ground before speaking. I failed both of you. You don't have to. No. He gently shook his head. I kept choosing the easy path. I let Daniel handle everything because it was convenient. I should have paid attention. There wasn't really a perfect response, so we stood there together for a while. No speeches, no promises that we'd magically become a perfect family. Just three people trying to figure out what honesty looked like after years of believing the wrong story. Over the following months, things kept moving. The foundation completed its review and formally withdrew Daniel's public recognition. My company received written acknowledgement confirming it had funded the education project. The financial records were turned over to the appropriate authorities and institutions reviewing the matter. I wasn't part of those decisions, and I let those processes take their course. Rachel finalized her separation. She thanked me once for believing her when almost nobody else had. We still exchanged messages from time to time. mostly to check in. As for Daniel, we haven't rebuilt our relationship. He reached out once through his attorney about documents. Later, he sent a short text that simply said, "You could have handled this differently." I never replied. There wasn't anything left to argue about. My relationship with my parents changed in quieter ways. Instead of sending money to an account someone else controlled, I sat down with them and helped organize their finances. We opened accounts they could access themselves. We set up automatic bill payments together. Mom learned how to check her balance on her phone. The first time she did it by herself, she smiled like she'd learned a new language. Dad started calling me with questions instead of pretending everything was fine. Sometimes they still apologized. I eventually started telling them they didn't have to do it every time. One Sunday, Mom made dinner. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the apple pie we'd baked together weeks earlier. At one point, she looked at me and laughed. "You know, I used to think you were the strong one because you never complained." I smiled. I wasn't strong. I just stayed quiet. She nodded. I know the difference now. That meant more to me than any apology. I still think about everything that happened. Not every day, but often enough. Losing almost $200,000 hurt. Finding out how it happened hurt even more. But the hardest part wasn't the money. It was realizing how easily trust can replace questions. These days, I don't live in my brother's shadow anymore. I don't compete with the version of him our family once believed in. I simply live my own life. It's quieter, it's smaller in some ways, and it's honest. Before I end my story, I'd really like to hear what you think. If you were in my position, could you forgive a family member after something like this? Or would you keep your distance? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for staying with me all the way to the end.